They drove a blade into her back during a live exercise, left her bleeding in the sand with her GPS torn away and her comms silent, convinced she was gone for good. Yet, 48 hours later, she walked through the base gates again, steady, wordless, unbroken. No yelling, no blame, just one purpose: to set things right. Because what they failed to grasp was that Navy SEALs don't need a rifle to make betrayal cost everything. Before we unfold what happened, hit that bell and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because today you'll see what it means when a SEAL returns from the grave. The wind rose early at Red Haven Range, dry and slicing, sweeping over the open flats like a knife searching for flesh. It tugged at tent flaps and spun grit across the ridges still burned black from last month's live fire drills. Dawn hadn't broken yet, just a bruised orange line where sky touched desert. But the heat already crouched beneath the soil like it was waiting its turn. Lieutenant Commander Laura Quinn stood by the staging racks, gloved hands lightly on a supply crate, uniform squared, elbows locked. She didn't fidget or adjust her gear or scan the horizon like the rest. She simply watched the light shift and waited for the call. Unit Bravo 6, loadout confirmed. 3 Marines strode past. Sergeant Miles Drake first, broad-shouldered mirrored shades, uneven and half-dark, rifle slung like an extra limb. Corporal Reese Marlowe followed, gnawing a protein bar as if the world was just background static. Private Eli Cross brought up the rear, quiet, barely 2 years out of boot. Each gave her a nod out of habit. Drake's smirk didn't reach his eyes. Hope the SEALs remember what team they're on this time. Lara said nothing, didn't even glance his way. She hoisted her pack, checked her recon med kit and comm node, fastened the final strap. That silence rattled them more than any comeback could. They gathered at the rally stake where a strip of red cloth snapped once in the wind, then hung still. A junior evaluator marked boxes on his clipboard, then stepped aside. The 4 stood shoulder to shoulder, backs to base, eyes turned east. Beyond stretched the outer zone, mock hostels, jammer fields, uneven terrain riddled with sand pits, and fake perimeters seeded with hidden flares. Not lethal, but real enough to prove a point. Sergeant Miles Drake clicked his radio. Bravo 6, comms check. Marlowe, good. Cross, good. Lieutenant Commander Lara Quinn's voice came last, calm and level. 6 Alpha, green light. They moved. The landscape shifted fast. Low ridges, dry channels, blind pockets cut between jagged rock. They advanced in a staggered diamond, Lara at the point. Every step she took landed sure, even where the sand crumbled thin. When she lifted a hand to halt, the others froze, half a beat late. Somewhere ahead, a dummy mortar boomed, echoing hollow against the hills. Simulated contact, 600 north, Marlowe muttered. Drake smirked. Let's hope the princess up front remembers which way is out. Lara gave no reaction. She twisted the focus on her monocular, dropped to one knee and swept for beam sensors half buried in the dust. A few hand signals left and right, precise, silent. They followed, slower than they should have. The drag was deliberate. The sand thickened ahead as haze rolled over the flats like fog without moisture. Visibility sank to a few hundred feet. Nothing moved. Cross whispered, half joking. Feels like ghost ground. Drake's voice came louder. Then let's hope the ghost knows where she's going. She did, always had. But even ghosts knew better than to ignore their backs. They slipped into a ravine single file, boots scraping sand-slick stone, the slope too steep for talk. Drake led this time, calling it a terrain choice. Lara didn't argue, just scanned the edges instead. debris scattered wrong, a glint of glass from old smoke shells half buried near the base. She counted 6. Too many for a routine drill this far out. Shadows thickened at the bottom. The ravine curved east, a throat of rock narrowing to single file. Lara raised a fist. The team halted. She glanced upward. Faint residue streaked across the rock face. Signal flare stains from last week's SEAL rotation. They weren't the first to run this path. Bravo 6, she said into her mic, visual en route Echo 7, advancing to breach perimeter. Static hissed back. Say again, Drake's voice crackled faintly. You're cutting. Then nothing. She fine-tuned her set, still dead. Distortion, Cross murmured. Maybe terrain. Maybe, she answered quietly, or something else. Lara motioned onward. They scaled the far wall slowly, using grips and boot wedges. At the ridge top, the desert opened again, flat scrub, endless tan. Ahead stood a simulated fence line, and in its center, a decaying metal outpost. 3 walls upright, 1 corner caved in, rust catching sharp sunlight. Target in sight, Lara said evenly. Retrieve the beacon, extract, no deviation. Drake gave a curt nod. Copy. They advanced across open ground, no cover, only heat shimmer and gravel crunching under boots. Marlowe flanked right, Cross close left, Drake center, always glancing back at Lara, not like protection, more like calculation. The first flashbang burst 60 yards out, loud but harmless, triggered by a buried pressure plate. Part of the exercise. Lara's eyes snapped instantly toward Cross. They'd edged a blade into her back during a live exercise, left her bleeding in the sand with her GPS torn off, and her comms dead. Convinced she was finished. 48 hours later, she walked back through the base gates. Quiet, erect, unbroken. No shouting, no pointing fingers, only one intent. Make it right. Because what they never considered was that SEALs don't need rifles to make betrayal cost everything. He'd cut too close to a line of disturbed earth. Stop, she snapped, lunging in. Too late. Another flash, closer this time. Air pulse only. Eli staggered and nearly went down. She steadied him before he hit the dirt. You okay? He blinked, nodded, chest shallow. Didn't see it. Now you do, she said, hauling him up with no accusation, just facts. Behind them, Miles barked. Didn't know SEAL training included babysitting. Reese chuckled under his breath. Lara didn't turn, she simply signaled them toward the outpost. They reached the perimeter with no further trouble. The structure showed wear from past drills, metal torn at the seams, shadows deep inside. Lara gave a tight 2-finger entry signal. Eli and Reese peeled left and right, while Miles slotted in behind her. She stepped through the threshold. Inside was cooler. Dust hung heavy. A single steel crate blinked faint green in the corner. She dropped to one knee and scanned it with her wrist console. Beacon live. No tamper flag. Mission nearly complete. Behind her the air shifted. Even a glance over the shoulder would have ruined the timing, and she refused them that satisfaction, keeping her eyes on the readout. Miles' voice slid low, too practiced for protocol. On my mark. Then the whisper of a blade leaving its sheath. The room felt stale, like it hadn't been opened in years. Dust motes turned where sunlight struck a bullet hole. Lara kept watching the beacon pulse, slow and low. One signal, one extraction, routine. Boots moved against the grit. She noted it without looking up. Miles's breathing tightened, shallow in his throat. Her hand hovered near the sidearm clipped to her thigh, not to draw, just to confirm it was there. Target's clear, Miles muttered. Wrong words for any radio call, wrong for the moment. The knife's whisper cut through the static first, then a force like a hammer slammed into her upper back, clean and precise between plates, just under the seam. She gasped from the shock of how neat the strike was. Her chest hit the floor and dust burst up like a quiet bloom. Eli's voice shattered the hush. "You didn't." "She had it coming," Miles said, pulling the blade free, voice low and steady, loyalty above rank. Reese crouched, eyes darting. "Man, she's still breathing." Miles glared, not for long. Lara's vision blurred. Pain flared sharp through her ribs, but her mind stayed methodical. She counted her pulse, breath shallow but even. Her hand stayed near the gun. She could draw, but she didn't. Eli hesitated, sweat purling at his temple. "This isn't right, Sergeant. She's command." Miles hissed back, "You want to lose your career for her? They'll take my word over yours. You follow orders, Marine." The silence that followed hit harder than the blade. Miles ripped the GPS tag from Lara's vest and tossed it into the trench outside. "She got separated in the breach. That's the report. Copy?" Reese and Eli nodded but said nothing. Miles crouched again, wiping the knife handle clean on his sleeve, then looked down at her with a small, satisfied grin. "SEAL or not, you forgot rule number 1. Turn your back on the wrong man, and you don't turn back at all." He stood and signaled them out. The three vanished through the doorway, their boots fading into the wind. Lara stayed where she'd fallen, one arm pinned beneath her, one eye half open. The warmth spreading under her vest wasn't fear, it was blood, data, and calculation. Depth of penetration, angle of the strike, force of impact, all logged in her mind. Outside, the sand began to slide over their tracks, the wind almost erasing the crime. Almost. Her fingers crawled toward the crate. The beacon's dim pulse brushed against her knuckles like a heartbeat refusing to stop. Her vision blurred, but her thoughts stayed precise. Through blood in her mouth, she whispered flatly, "Copy that, Sergeant." Then she closed her eyes, not to rest, but to wait. The cold came first, sharper than the wound. Not pain, but the sudden chill, as the desert flipped from day to night, the heat she'd cursed hours ago bleeding away like breath through a trap door. Each exhale fogged in front of her face. She rolled onto her side, agony slicing through her shoulder blade, vision swimming, but she didn't scream. Screaming wasted oxygen. Her gloved hand searched the dirt until it found the med kit still clipped to her thigh. Slippery with blood, she tore it open, yanked out gauze, pressed it hard against the wound, and counted seconds instead of breaths. Air first, blood second, distance last. The code that kept you alive when no one was coming. She drew a deep breath, clenched her jaw, and began to move. One arm, one knee. Drag, breathe, count. The desert clawed back. Sand stung the wound, clung to her sweat, burned like salt. Her teeth chattered from shock. Above her, the stars looked close enough to touch, cruel in their calm. Half a mile, maybe more. The ground tilted upward toward the ridge, beyond which lay the beacon zone, her original target. She replayed the briefing like a mental map. At the crest, she spotted debris, a half-buried crate, edges scorched from an old drill. She clawed to it, pried it open with her knife, found scraps, a split ration pack, a coiled saline pouch, a flare gun. No signal rounds, only red fire. It would do. She bit down on a strip of torn cloth, braced the barrel against a rock and burned the wound shut with the flare's heat. The smell of iron and smoke hit first. Her vision tunneled to black edges. She kept consciousness by counting backward from 60. When the final count reached 0, Lara spat the cloth out and lay still, her chest rising in short, steady pulses. Above her, the low thump of rotor blades rolled through the night. The extraction chopper, the one meant to take her home. She tilted her head just enough to catch the faint lights skimming the horizon before they drifted east. No voice called her name over the radio. No one even checked the channel. The silence that followed weighed heavier than the wound. She reached for the compass strapped to her wrist. The glass was cracked, but the needle still turned true. Aligning it north, she steadied her breathing and began to crawl again, slow, deliberate, efficient. Every inch erased another lie they'd buried her under. When the ridge broke open into a wide basin of dark sand, she stopped long enough to whisper, voice rasping thin through grit and blood, "They think I'm dead." Her eyes narrowed beneath the desert moon, a faint gleam cutting through exhaustion. Good. At Red Haven Range, the forward base gates groaned open just after 700. The sun had already stretched long shadows across stacked container walls, glaring off neat rows of silent Humvees. Around the compound, the morning routine hummed, chow lines, gear checks, easy jokes traded over steaming mugs. By the tarmac, Sergeant Miles Drake stood with hands on his hips, squinting into the heat shimmer. Corporal Reese Marlowe lounged on a comms crate, chewing the edge of a protein wrapper, while Private Eli Cross sat nearby, silent, helmet resting beside him. "Guess command bought it," Miles muttered. "No questions, no search. They think she's still out there." He let the rest hang. Eli shifted uneasily. "We shouldn't have." Miles's look cut him off, sharp, final. "We followed orders. She got lost, that's all." Across the yard, Commander Reese Hayes stepped out of the main tent with an aide, clipboard under his arm. "Sergeant Drake," he called. "Briefing room, now." Miles nodded, motioning to his men. Same story, no freelancing. They fell in behind him, boots crunching in rhythm, until the sound of tires on gravel froze them mid-stride. A medic transport rolled through the rear gate, unmarked, matte gray, low and quiet. It wasn't on the schedule. Miles frowned as it halted near the intake bay. The side door opened. Lieutenant Commander Lara Quinn stepped out, alone. No escort, no stretcher. She stood on her own, one arm in a soft sling, outer gear stripped but rank still clear on her collar. Dried blood edged her undershirt, her face pale but steady, eyes locked forward. She crossed the gravel with calm precision, no limp, no hesitation. When she passed Miles' line of sight, his jaw tightened, but no words came. She didn't look at him, didn't blink, didn't speak, just walked straight into the command tent. Inside, a radio tech turned toward the aide beside him, whispering, "She's alive." The aide nodded slowly, eyes wide. Walked in like she never left. Outside, Miles' smirk was gone. Reese looked sick, and Eli couldn't meet a soul's eyes. Just sat on a crate, staring at the dirt between his boots. No one had believed she'd come back, certainly not like this. Quiet, upright, undeniable. She hadn't just survived. She'd chosen when to return. Inside the command tent, the lights hummed faintly. Too bright for dawn, too cold for the desert just beyond the canvas. The air was still, broken only by the distant thump of base machinery and the soft scratch of a pen against paper. Lieutenant Commander Lara Quinn sat across a folding table, her injured arm resting loosely in a sling across her lap. No blood now, no dust, just the quiet rhythm of someone who'd burned through panic and settled into something sharper. Across from her, Commander Reese Hayes read from the incident report, tone clipped and sterile. "Com interference during Phase 2 of the recon drill. Unit separation at approach. You proceeded solo to the beacon site." Lara nodded once. "Affirmative. No confirmation on your team's movement? Negative. No radio contact after breach line. I continued per protocol. Hayes studied her for a moment. Wound, flare shrapnel, self-treated with medkit and thermal cauterization. She didn't blink. Correct. I did not file a casualty report, she added, because I did not consider myself one. One of the junior officers nearby raised an eyebrow. Hayes didn't smile, but his mouth shifted like he wanted to. And navigation? No GPS? Compass, terrain markers, memory from orientation brief. The silence that followed stretched tight. Hayes leaned back slightly. No accusations, Lieutenant. None filed. You're not making this simple. Her voice stayed level. Nothing about this is simple, sir. Later, in the medbay, Petty Officer Cal Torres rechecked her dressings. His hands were steady, but his expression wasn't. He glanced at the tent flap before speaking. They stabbed you. Lara didn't look up. They left me. Same difference. He peeled back the gauze, revealing the cauterized burn tracing her shoulder blade. A low whistle escaped him. You're not reporting them? Not yet. Torres frowned. You're giving them a chance to walk. I'm giving them a chance to expose themselves. He shook his head. That's optimistic. She finally met his eyes. No, that's leverage. Evidence lasts longer when it walks into the room on its own. He didn't reply, just nodded and began rewrapping her shoulder with fresh compression mesh. Outside, the whispers were already spreading through the barracks. She'd crawled back half dead, no evac, no backup, still made it in, never said a name, never demanded justice, and that silence unnerved them more than anger ever could. When someone refuses to accuse, everyone starts wondering what they're waiting for. By evening, Red Haven Range had gone still again. No wind, no drills, just the slow bleed of sky darkening to muted navy as the base lights flicked on one by one. In the simulation hangar, Lara stood alone beside a folding table, sliding on her gloves with quiet focus. Her uniform was unchanged. Desert fatigues, boots cleaned but unshined. No ribbons, no decoration. Just the look of someone who'd been through hell and refused to wear it like a badge. At the far end, Torres leaned against a supply crate, arms crossed. He watched her check the training logs, then stepped closer. You sure you want to lead this one? Lara didn't glance up. I requested it. Command approved fast. She finally met his eyes, steady, certain. Because they already know how it ends. Torres nodded slowly. You going to confront him? No. She tightened the strap on her plate carrier. Not confront. Then what? Correct. Torres didn't push. He stepped back, opened his field tablet and pulled up the roster. Drake's name was there, so were Marlowe and Cross. By 0600 the next morning, the drill was posted. No announcement, no base-wide email, just a sheet tacked to the board. Joint Breach Reevaluation Exercise, Unit Bravo 6. A recert test on paper, but everyone read it and everyone understood. At 0700, the teams gathered at the south edge of the breach zone. The terrain had been reset to flat sand, mock bunkers and low cover walls. A handful of SEAL instructors lingered by the outpost with clipboards. No one spoke. Miles stood at the boundary with Reese and Eli flanking him, bouncing lightly on his toes, jaw tight, chest forward. The swagger felt thinner now, practiced. Lara walked out of the tent without ceremony. She didn't need one. Her calm silence unsettled more than any shout ever could. She stepped to the front and spoke softly to the group. This is a standard close-quarters breach drill. Pairs will rotate through the mock facility. No weapons. Contact only. Control, not force. Her gaze found Miles. You'll go first. He didn't answer, merely stepped forward, a smirk tugging at one corner. "You sure you want me first?" he asked. "I'm sure," she replied. Young Marines gathered near the observation tent, unofficial spectators who always show when something's about to happen. Torres stood on the perimeter, hands folded behind his back. A nearby instructor leaned in, whispering, "You think she'll embarrass him?" Torres shook his head. "No, she's going to remind him." With that, Lara Quinn stepped onto the mat. Not to punish, not to retaliate, but to correct what had been forgotten. The breech mat had been cleared to spec, 40 by 20 feet, dusted clean, hazard lines taped. The floor looked surgical, not chaotic. It was deliberate, so what followed would be witnessed without excuse. Miles stepped on first, rolling his shoulders like he was limbering for sparring, jaw set in that cocky, half-challenge look that had carried him through drills untested. But his eyes kept flicking, toward instructors, toward the small cluster of Marines beyond the tape, toward Lara. She walked onto the mat exactly as she had walked into the base 2 days earlier, measured, unreadable, spine straight, collar squared. Commander Reese Hayes stood to the side, arms folded, and gave a single nod. "Standard engagement. No strikes, no takedowns beyond rotation control," he said. Lara's reply was flat. "Understood." Miles said nothing. He bounced once more and took his position, moving with a lazy, performative confidence. Loose arms, flexed knees, wide posture. "Begin," Hayes ordered. Miles circled her as he had in the ravine, replaying the same theater. Miles circled her in a wide orbit, boots too loud against the mat. It was all performance. Lara didn't move, not an inch. Her weight stayed even, hands relaxed at her sides, elbows soft. Not a stance. Stillness. "You sure you're ready for this?" Miles called out. "Hate to see you crawl again." No answer. The silence stretched until it bent. He lunged first, fast, reaching for her shoulder, meant to make her flinch. She didn't. She waited, let his hand come close, then pivoted slightly, just enough to redirect his reach. That subtle shift made him overextend. It was all she needed. She caught his wrist midair, her other hand locked his elbow. In one clean motion, she rotated, using his momentum to throw him off balance. His boots lifted, his back slammed against the mat with a sharp slap. She followed through, dropping one knee lightly on his sternum, enough to hold him, not harm him. Her grip twisted his wrist down, forcing his shoulder flat. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The room froze. Miles' breath came in short bursts, not from pain but from disbelief. He was pinned by someone half his size who hadn't said a word. Lara leaned close, voice low, calm, but caught clearly by the nearby mic. "Lesson 1, she murmured. "You don't need eyes in the back of your head if you remember who was behind you." Then she released him, stood, straightened her collar, and walked off the mat. Miles stayed down longer than pride required. When he finally sat up, he looked at Commander Hayes, then at the Marines, still standing in stunned quiet. No applause, no cheers. It wasn't a fight, it was a correction. Nothing more needed to be said. The next morning, Command HQ was silent. No windows, no distractions, just a steel table, 6 folding chairs, and a screen ready to play what no one wanted to see again. Sergeant Miles Drake sat rigid, jaw locked. Corporal Reese Marlowe. Beside him, arms folded. Defiance drained from his face. Private Eli Cross. At the end, eyes down, fingers tapping nervously on his knee. The door opened. Commander Reese Hayes entered with a tablet, no words wasted. He tapped the screen and helmet cam footage filled the display, grainy, time-stamped. Lara crouched near the beacon, Miles behind her. The shove, the flash of steel, her body hitting the dirt. Eli's shaken whisper, "You didn't." Hayes froze the frame. "This was sent anonymously to Oversight," he said. "Metadata traces back to your unit. I'll ask once." His gaze fixed on Eli. "You filmed this?" Eli swallowed. "Yes, sir." "Did you know what was coming?" "No, not like that. I thought—" He stopped. There was no saving it. Miles turned, voice sharp. "You're folding on me now?" Reese shifted, jaw tight. "We're already folded." Hayes let the silence stretch, then turned back to Miles. "Sergeant," Commander Reese Hayes said evenly, "this footage confirms an assault on a superior officer during a live operation. No SIM trigger, no emergency escalation, just betrayal." Miles Drake stayed silent. "You are hereby stripped of rank and suspended from all joint training assignments. Article 32 hearing to follow, pending final command review." Hayes turned to Steadfast Corporal Reese Marlowe. "Your role as an accessory and your silence after the fact earn administrative discharge effective immediately." Then to Private Eli Cross. "You came forward late, but you did come forward. Your record will reflect cooperation, but your commission ends here." Eli nodded slowly, still staring at the floor. No protest, no defense. Hayes closed the tablet. "Dismissed." No one spoke. Chairs scraped the floor. Boots scuffed against concrete as they filed out. Outside, the sunlight hit harder than before. Same courtyard, same flag snapping against the pole, but the air had changed. Postures stiffened, steps more deliberate. At the far end, Lieutenant Commander Lara Quinn stood by the observation rail, hands clasped behind her back, uniform crisp, untouched by the weight of it all. Eli glanced up when he saw her, then looked away fast. Miles hesitated near her, close enough to be seen, not close enough to speak. He lingered a second, maybe two, then walked off. Hayes stepped up beside her. "You're not testifying?" "No need." He nodded once. "Why not?" She didn't shift her gaze. "Because betrayal already sentenced them. I just waited for the truth to arrive." The breeze brushed against her sleeve. Same direction as the day she'd come back. Same scent of sand and iron. But now the ground didn't feel like it wanted to bury anything. It felt like it remembered. And now, so did everyone else. If someone left you bleeding in the field, would you stay silent like she did, or speak the moment you got back? And do you think silence can cut deeper than revenge when it belongs to someone trained to wait? Drop your thoughts below. We read everyone. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next mission. Share this with someone who still believes betrayal ends quietly. This is Major Tom's Tales. Your next story's already on screen. Go watch it now, and we'll see you in the next debrief.